So today I'm going to talk about something a little bit different. This isn't going to be a language log, but more just a chat about phrasing and some of the philosophies and the learning method. Because I've been working on phrasing for over 2 years now, and in that time, the product has changed a lot. Um, and I made some decisions along the way that I wouldn't have expected myself to make ahead of time. And I think I've made plenty of controversial decisions. So I'd like to go into them, dig into them, and explain some of the rationale behind them. And today, I especially want to talk about the use of long expressions. So, in phrasing, the way it works is you create expressions. These can be, anywhere from a couple words to a couple sentences, and we teach them to you one word at a time, two words at a time, three words at a time, up to full phrases. So we start with one word and then we slowly build up as you start to learn more of the language. And the way phrasing is set up to work, and the way I encourage it, and the way the financial incentives work, is it is more beneficial to create longer, more complicated expressions. So one of the things that I found when I was building the application um, is, well, let me take a step back and describe where the product started. So originally, when I built phrasing, the idea was you would upload some content and it would find I plus one content. So when using the spaced repetition, it would figure out your level. And then phrasing would try to show you a piece of information or an expression at any time that contained just one novel piece of information. So try to find things just beyond your level. And that's what the application did when it was first built. That was what the first version was. And I started using it when that's what it did. And I found it to not have very good long term value. It was much easier to get started. And when using the application, it was easier. But just because something is easier to do does not mean that it's better ultimate learning. And so what really changed my mind was I added a Chinese sentence. Um, and it was very long, and I don't speak a word of Chinese. And so I found that to be suboptimal, and I really worked to make the expressions shorter and more targeted and more I plus one and more beginner friendly. But I still left this expression in my library. And over the course of a couple months, I eventually learned the entire expression. Um, and I'll try to repeat it now, although I'm sure my tones are terrible. But it's a very, keep in mind, I don't speak Chinese, but 传说中有一位传奇的巫师，他的功夫机一干长传奇，他有一私房，真叫值得一教的对手。And I mean, this is not to flex my Chinese, but it's a very long sentence. And given that I don't speak any Chinese, I wouldn't expect that information to have saved. But it did very subconsciously, very naturally. My brain just held on to that information. And all of the shorter expressions that I created very quickly became very routine. Um, the ones that were 4 or 5 words, the sentence comes up, and I know exactly what the word is because there's only a couple syllables for my brain to remember in its head, and it ties them together perfectly. And I don't do any learning. I'm never actually struggling. My brain is just completing the sentence, it's completing the phonemes. There is an idea in memory science where you can only hold 7 items in your head. And so my personal theory is in the beginning, that's like 7 letters, then it gets to 7 syllables, then it gets to 7 words, then it gets to 7 word pairs or phrases. Um, however, if it's less than 7 words, it takes very little time before your brain is able to just save these 7 words to go together. And you're not actually learning the words that you're filling in. Uh, and now that I've been using the application for a little over 6 months, almost all of my expressions that are less than 10 words, let's say, I, if any word is missing, if half of them are missing, as long as I see one word, I know what all the rest of the words are. and I'll find myself filling them in, and I don't know what the words mean that I can fill in. Like, I'll catch myself, and I'll say, "Wait, I know this entire sentence, but I couldn't tell you what each individual word means," which is very not ideal. Where if you compare and contrast that to these longer expressions, I can actually deduce what these mean. I struggle to fill them in. If a word comes in and it's missing, and it's a 25 word expression, I don't immediately know that's the word that's missing. Especially at a lower level, my brain is not able to just cheat its way there. I have to actually think. I have to actually listen. I have to read what the expression is saying and figure out what part is missing and try to fill in the word and remember it. Because I'm also being the way phrasing works is it can test you on any word in any expression and any word pairs in any expression, any phrases in any expression. You really lose that ability to just associate, to really quickly go through reviews. I see people post Anki review sessions where they do hundreds of cards per hour. I mean, I'm talking 3, 4, 5, 600 cards per hour with like an average review time of less than a second or two. And with phrasing, you're not going to do that. You can't do that. Like, there's just too much. And I guess if you were to create expressions with really short phrases in them, sure, you could probably do that. But when you use phrasing as it's intended with the longer expressions, it takes time to think and to parse through it and to recall and to read through and to save the information. And that time, that work, that effort is very valuable for learning. I find myself learning so much more because I can't do any of the cheating stuff. I have to actually learn the language. And so just because of this one Chinese sentence, I started to shift all of my expressions into longer sentences. I almost never create an expression with less than 20 words. And that has just been remarkably helpful. None of these sentences that are 20 words or longer can I recite. Even the ones in French or the ones in Dutch, I can speak these languages, and they fall into that 7 phrase short term memory bucket that I was talking about. But I haven't been able to cheat my way through these yet. Um, and yeah, so that's why I personally shifted to these longer expressions. It also leans into some of the technical benefits of phrasing, of teaching you by full phrases and interlinking the different cards, connecting them to our language graphs. So you have this like interconnected web of language and really leaning into the full complexity of language. And it just gives your expressions life. I mean, and like as in shelf life is what I'm looking for. Your expressions can then last you years of learning. So you extract an expression once and you'll see that expression and you'll learn from it for years, which is exactly what you want. I don't want a card that I then memorize and then I trash it. Like, I want something that I can tease out information slowly over time and just let my brain fill in all the grooves that this expression is laying out for me. And so that's also how phrasing is intended to be used. And by that, I mean, with phrasing, we just charge you per expression. We don't charge you per word. We don't charge you per character, even though the pricing of the expressions is actually by word and by character, depending on, it's by token or by character, depending on which services we're using. So if you create a longer expression, it actually costs substantially more, like up to 2 or 3 times more than a shorter expression. Or, I mean, if it's, 2 or 3 times the length. So if you're creating a 5-word versus a 20-word expression, it's actually up to 10 times cheaper or 10 times more expensive to create the longer expression. And so to get your money's worth and to make full use of your expressions, it behooves you to create these longer expressions. That's kind of the incentive that I want to give users. Because it provides such a better learning experience. And it's very counterintuitive, or not even counterintuitive, but it's counter to common advice, especially if you look online for how to create the optimal Anki deck. There's a bunch of advice, like Anki is where you put things you understand that you want to remember. I saw that in a YouTube comment somewhere, and I thought that was perfect because I think that is the best way to use Anki, and Anki is great for that. But that's not what I built. I didn't build Anki. I built another application. And this is an application where you put things that one day you would like to be able to understand. And then we'll teach you slowly by slowly, and you'll slowly unpack it. And don't worry about understanding the entire thing from day one. Um, there's this experience, and I've mentioned this on a couple of these episodes before. But I'll be struggling. I won't understand anything. I don't get a single word in the entire sentence, maybe one or two cognates. And I'm just struggling. It keeps coming up. And then slowly I'm getting the words. And then it's like a lot of rote memorization. And I'm just trying to recall from my short term memory. And I keep going like that. And slowly I'm kind of remembering these words, but like I don't know them as words. I'm just kind of memorizing their place. And there's a little bit of cheating. Like if I heard the word, I wouldn't know what it means. And then one day, a sentence comes up and I look at it. And I'm like, wait a minute, this whole sentence makes sense. This whole expression is understandable. And it's just, there's this very almost literal unlock where it's just you look at it and all of a sudden you realize you understand that you've been looking at this sentence for months and it hasn't been making sense. And now all of a sudden it's perfect. And all of these words kind of like slot into place. And all of a sudden they really take shape and they really take meaning. And you've struggled over these words and you've tried to remember them and you've teased out the spelling and you've tried to like identify, which ones they are based off of the missing word. And so you've done all of this work. And then there's just this click where it all just slots into place. And that's, you know, first of all, that does come. It does take a couple months, so it can feel a little bit overwhelming at first. But that's the feeling that I'm really trying to drive home with phrasing, because that feeling of all of a sudden this large, complicated sentence makes so much sense. Is super rewarding, and it saves this information so much better than any of these short little sentences that I've had where it comes up. I could fill in all the words. I don't have to think about it. I don't know what any of the words mean. On to the next review. Like that's not real language learning. That's practicing. That's memorizing, but it's not language learning. And so this is this is why I encourage longer sentences on phrasing. This is how phrasing is built to work. Um, it's something that you won't see a lot because it doesn't really work on other applications. Phrasing has a lot going for it that makes this possible. It's not just you could create longer sentences in Anki and do the same thing. There's the whole way that we teach you word by word, the prioritization, the focusing on different phrases, the aligning across different things. There's the contextual learning, which I'm sure I'll go into another episode where I don't ask you for I don't show you the translation when you type in the word. I used to. Um, I used to show you the English translation of the word because I have that information. But the thing is, I use that all the time. And that's called non-contextualized learning, where you see the translation that you want. And even though it's in context, your brain is lazy. It sees it. It's not going to do the difficult thing of teasing out which word it needs to fill in. It builds this very one-to-one relationship. And so with the latest version of phrasing with command, we no longer show you the English word or the word you need to fill in. You have to look at the translation. We highlight the corresponding phrase, and you have to figure out which words do you see in the target language, which words do those correlate to in English, and then which words are missing, what pieces are missing in English, and then how do you say that in the target language? And that's 4 or 5 steps that you have to do, and it gets to be very, very natural. But those 4 steps really solidify the learning. That's called contextualized learning. And it's massively helpful. I said I was going to do another episode on this. I guess this is a little sneak preview, but it's little things like this where, I used it a different way first because that's how you use these other applications. And then I realized that this was a suboptimal way of learning. I was cheating all the time because that's what brains do. And so I took away those mechanisms to cheat and I built a way to learn a language where you aren't cheating, where you're actually doing the learning, where, it is more difficult, it is weirder, it's different, it's unique. But I promise if you stick with it, it's insanely rewarding, it's insanely effective. And it's also really great to be studying the same expression for months and months and months and still have more to go. Like I added a bunch of Arabic sentences that are like 30 words long and they're complex. And I understand half of the sentences. I've been learning these for 3 months, 4 months, and I get every single word wrong every single day. And I still haven't gotten to that point where I understand these full sentences. And I think that's great. The fact that I can create one expression and I can have a year's worth of learning from that, and then 10 years worth of review from that, that's what phrasing is built to do because The expressions, the extractions, um, they cost a lot of money to make. Like we spare no expense in creating the highest quality learning materials. So what's the point of creating the highest quality learning materials if it's only going to last you a month before you've cheated your way out of any potential value from it? So that's a little explanation as to why we have longer sentences, why you should try longer sentences. This is also a plea to anybody who sees the application and thinks, oh no, it's much better to have shorter expressions. I need to have I plus one. 40 or 100 expressions per month is nowhere near enough to learn a language. You know, give it a shot. Reconsider, because I understand where you're coming from. I understand this point of view. That's why my initial version of the application followed all of those other principles. But through experience and testing and iteration, I just found that it was suboptimal for learning, or really that it was hyper optimal for cheating. My brain could just do very low effort. It was a very gameable system. And so I made an ungameable system that's just language learning. And yeah, give phrasing a try. Try out the longer expressions. Don't be scared of them. I know they're very overwhelming at first. And, when I first added the expressions, I spent months trying to make it so that it could have shorter expressions for beginners, until it just eventually clicked to me that, wait a minute, you don't need to have your hand held that much in the beginning. Just dive in, trust the process, go with it. It takes about a week or two for the spaced repetition system to get warmed up, to know everything that's in your memory and how it's working, and start making really good recommendations. Um, and yeah, those expressions, they will start to make sense. And when you look back on it in 6 months and you have all of these expressions that are long, complex, you can practice saying them, you can practice your accents, you can practice your intonation, you can practice saying it quickly. Yeah, it's great. It's worth it. Give it a shot. That's what I got.